All right, South Africa has suspended the import of birds and chicken products from Zimbabwe following an outbreak of the highly pathogenic, it's called H5N8 bird flu at a Zimbabwean poultry farm. The strain is spread by wild bird migrations and has been detected in several countries across Africa, Asia and Europe over the past 2 years. Well, let's look at the impact of this. We're joined in studio by the CEO of the SA Poultry Association, Kevin Lovell. Kevin, thank you for being with us. So what is the impact? Not huge from Zimbabwe specifically.
Well, to Zimbabwe, it actually happened to be found on the single biggest commercial producer in Zimbabwe.
Shame. So
it will have a very negative effect to Zimbabwe's poultry industry, because it does seem to have come from wild birds, ducks in particular. They're migratory birds. That means there's a risk for further spread in Zimbabwe and unfortunately spread to South Africa. So don't worry about the people smuggling through the fence, because these are sort of high-range bombers.
This is flying ducks. And
they are flying ducks, and you can imagine them on your mantelpiece, but in this case they will bring trouble to South Africa.
Do we know their migratory patterns, or is there just
in a vague way? But obviously they don't always follow the traffic instructions like taxi drivers, so they go anywhere. But there's more or less a zone. They would still be coming southwards. At some point they'll turn and go back. Okay. So it's possible that they could actually do their U-turn going back to Europe before they get to us. It's a high risk situation for South Africa, not as a disaster yet. So in fact tomorrow the state, that's the national government, provincial governments, the industry, scientists, private veterinarians will all get together. We'll look at the national plan we have for South Africa. Do we think it's still good enough? Do we need to do any changes? Do we need to do extra sampling? How will we know if it's got here? It's all that kind of stuff, and then we'll be given homework to do on tomorrow.
Does this raise costs for chicken farmers, poultry producers? Does everybody have to now start complying with a whole lot of admin, which is necessary?
Well, there's a whole lot of what we call biosecurity rules that all farmers are meant to follow. In other words, that you do things that make it hard for bad things to get onto your farm. But like most things, people get a bit slack and they don't do all the things they should do all the time. So we've already told all the farmers they need to heighten them. We've given them ideas of what they have to do. After tomorrow's meeting, I'm sure we'll do more surveillance, testing to make sure it's not here. And that's both in backyard flocks and commercial flocks, because it's likely to first come from wild birds to backyard flocks and then to the commercial flocks. It's not guaranteed, but that's the likely way. You can't stop it coming to South Africa, but we can stop it spreading. So how do we do that? We actually have the resident African expert on avian influenza based in South Africa, the University of Pretoria, Onderstepoort, paid for by the industry as it so happens. The South Africa's chief vet is the president of the World Organization for Animal Health. I happen to sit on a global expert team on the disease as well. So there's a lot of skill in the country. We've just got to put that together and make it work.
So we know what we're doing, which is comforting.
We believe we know what we're doing, but we've never had to do it because we've never had it in chickens in South Africa.
This will be the tip.
And that's a big change between practicing and thinking you know how to do and then actually having to do it. And we don't want to do it. What does it mean? It will come most likely into the long-lived birds, the commercial hens that lay eggs, or the breeding hens that produce meat chickens or the baby meat chickens that we eat. So depending on where it goes, it can actually have very negative impacts on food security, food safety, and also on farmers directly.
Well, how confident can South Africans be right now if they go to a shop and buy some chicken, that it's okay?
If they buy chicken meat, absolutely fine, because every time chickens are slaughtered, they're checked, and you'd see quite quickly if there was something wrong. So there's nothing wrong now. And in the laying hens, you would see the colour, the eggs can become a bit discoloured and things like that, and we've seen nothing like that. So we're quite comfortable that everything is fine.
So you can eat eggs, you can eat chicken.
Well, we know that's what we like you to do anyway. We think you should eat more of them.
Is there anything you should avoid?
Not yet. But without being flippant about it, this particular avian influenza hasn't been found to be harmful to people. Any avian influenza can become harmful to people, but this particular one, if it does come to South Africa, is going to be a farming problem, not a human problem.
All right, and then unluckily for Zimbabwe, it will affect their operations because we're being careful. Could we export more to Zimbabwe? Is that?
Well, what we're actually trying to export now is assistance. So some of our technical team are going to go and help make sure that it's not spread further, because we have the skill and the resources. to try and help them clean out the farms that are affected, make sure they are clean so that the Zimbabweans can repopulate. That's actually better for Zimbabwe and for us as we get them up on their toes again, on their feet rather.
I'd like to challenge you, because the Poultry Association, often when we speak, there's been a fight and you want protection from government. So you want tariffs on cheap chicken imports coming in to make sure that the poultry producers in this country can make their profits and be sustainable. But if we are vulnerable, say something happens, then you don't actually want to have all your meat, chicken, poultry coming from one source, even if it's local.
Well, you see,
does this not highlight a potential vulnerability with being too protective, I guess?
It highlights a potential misunderstanding. We've never had a problem with fair trade, only with unfair trade. So all of our actions are designed to deal with dumping, primarily from Europe. And by the way, the Europeans aren't exporting, they're exporting at about 1/3 of what they used to export, because this avian influenza is still circulating in Europe at the moment. But we've got nothing against fair trade. In fact, we want to export as fair trade competitors. We don't want to export as dumpers, neither do we want to receive imports that are dumped.
Okay, so is there an opportunity, because we're receiving less from Europe, good for the local industry? Are we harnessing this opportunity to export more? Is anything like that?
Our main export target market's the Middle East, and people might say why, and that's because they'll never produce enough of their own chicken. They also eat a lot of chicken. The highest per capita consumption is an area. So we want to get into that market. We have started to open some of those markets. It's a slow process.
All right, so it's not like you can just harness what's happening.
You can't take them on your hand luggage. You know, you need to take a lot more than that to make it into a business, and there's a long way to go. But in fact, I've just recently been in the Middle East with a government-sponsored trade mission, and there'll be further. So as a joint exercise between government and industry, saying what are the blockages, how are we going to remove them one by one, until we can get in there and compete. Why do they have an interest in us? Most of their products come from Brazil, and they are looking for an alternative supply. We'd never replace Brazil, but we would just be an alternative to Brazil.
All right, thank you for educating us around avian flu again. Thank you. Poultry Association CEO Kevin Lovell.